All right, everybody, this is an Edpuzzle only for people who missed Monday so that they can follow along and know what we're doing, as this is important setup for what we're going to be doing with Lord of the Flies. So in the chat box, could you please tell me what are some big ideas found in literature that authors tend to write about? Make a list of at least 5 big ideas, topics, that you've noticed in a lot of stories you've read or movies you've watched. Okay, so here's just a small list. There's a lot, of course. And these are some of the big ideas that just came off the top of my head. Now, I put them in a bunch of different colors for you for a reason. Not just to make it stand out in the slide, but because if you were here, sorry about that, I would have given you these little different colored lenses for you to look at that list. And the different colors made these words stand out differently. If you'd have given you a blue color gel, and if you put that over your eye, you would have noticed that some of the words kind of totally disappeared. Some of the words became more bright. Some of the words got dull. And then we would have swapped to another color, looking through a red lens. And the same kind of a thing. Different words would pop out, and different words would kind of disappear, and different words would dull. And the point was that to make kind of a metaphor about when you are looking through different kinds of glasses or critical lenses, you're going to be able to see things that you might have missed because it makes them stand out. So if we're looking at specific kinds of illusions, if you know you want to be hunting for biblical illusions or Greek illusions, it's going to kind of put this slant on the story, and you're going to see a lot of things that have it and that you might have missed if you're just reading it without thinking about it. And that's kind of the point. And that's called critical lens theory. And it has benefits and costs. But that's what we're going to be doing with Lord of the Flies. You're going to be picking an illusion that you want to focus on and try to find stuff. Doesn't mean you can't notice other things, but you want to try to maybe focus on 1 or 2 so that your brain isn't too full of ideas and get confused. For you to kind of look for what might Golding be saying through the illusions that are in the story. If I put on these particular glasses, like the Egyptian mythology glasses, or the Nietzschean glasses, or the biblical glasses, or whatever. Okay. And so I also played for the class an excerpt from the snippet from a movie called They Live, which is a classic by John Carpenter, and he's the director you may have heard of that did the original Halloween, and then Halloween 3, he produced it. He did Creepshow, he did The Thing, he did The Fog. He did, he did Christine, the Stephen King movie. He tends to do horror movies. This one is just a snippet that's okay for you guys. It has this kind of moment that's kind of like the point I'm trying to make. So let me play and just show it to you real quick, and then you can respond. Hang on real quick. So just to set you up, in this movie, it is about this main guy who's actually a famous wrestler named Roddy Piper, but he's playing a different character, of course, and it's supposed to take place in the 1980s in an alternate kind of world where aliens have come and taken over, and they're putting in subliminal messages into marketing to make you just become puppets, right? And they're just using us, and it's making a lot of different political stuff, and that's not really important, but the point is what he's going through is kind of what we're going to be doing. Okay. And he doesn't know the aliens are there. He doesn't know that. He just finds these pair of glasses in a box in the back of this church that he thought was giving a sermon. He went into the church to listen to the sermon, and then he found out it was just a recording with a speaker, and he's like, what? And he sees all these boxes with glasses in them. And then the cops come, and he has to run. Sorry about the bell. He has to run, and this is him walking in downtown LA by the what's known as the area that's close to Skid Row in downtown LA. And he puts on the sunglasses, and then things get weird. Here we go. Gives him headaches. Hard to see the truth.
What's your problem? I said, what's your problem?
How are you today, sir?
Okay, how's it going?
Fine, thank you. Thank you, sir. Here you are, sir. Thank you. Hey, buddy. You gonna pay for that or what? Look, buddy, I don't want no hassle today. Either pay for it or put it back.
Sleep. 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 Sleep.
All right. So hopefully you got the point here that that's kind of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be putting on those glasses. Hopefully they don't give you a headache. And we're going to be looking at stories. And we're going to practice today with looking at stories with different lenses on and see how different things come to fruition. Here we go. So, what do you know about Cat in the Hat? If you know the story, think about what it's about. Think what the theme of the message is. The theme or the message might be. If you don't know, that's fine. Just say you don't know in the chat box. But if you do, tell me what you think the story is about from what you remember. Okay, so a lot of kids think, it's just about, a lot of people think it's about, kids having fun and being bored and maybe it's about hiding things from your parents or something because they don't tell, or maybe it's about ignoring what your parents tell you to do, right? If you recall, the very end of the story says something very interesting. It says, when the mom comes home, after everything was fixed, the mom says, what did you guys do today? Something like that. And then the very last line says, what would you do if your mother asked you? And it makes you think, maybe Dr. Seuss is trying to get you to think about morally, what would you do? Would you tell her the truth, or would you lie? And I think Dr. Seuss knew you'd lie. And Dr. Seuss knows you'd lie. You wouldn't tell your parents, right? So, that's kind of maybe the stories to get you to kind of think about your own morality for a little kid. Well, if I put on Friedrich Nietzsche's glasses on, let me tell you a little bit how it might change a little bit. Friedrich Nietzsche had this theory called the Übermensch, or the Overman. And that's where we get the word Superman from, actually. The guys that created Superman based it off that term. And Nietzsche thought that during his time, in the 1800s, there was a big shift between living a religious life and a secular life with the age of industrialization. And he thought, we need to not be sheeple. We need to think for ourselves and not be followers. If we want to be a true individual and find out who we are in this new age where we can define ourselves, we don't need the government to tell us who we are, society to tell us who we are. We need to decide for ourselves who we are. And that's a true Übermensch, someone who doesn't listen to other people's rules. They make up their own. It doesn't mean necessarily revolt against the government. It just means you do you, and don't just follow orders because other people tell you to, and to question the morality of your society and make up your own mind about what you think. And looking at the story, there's a lot of interesting elements, like the fish is constantly telling the kids what to do, and the kids ignore him. So if we're looking at a Nietzschean lens, maybe the fish is supposed to represent society or the government or whatever other group that tries to say, hey, this is how you need to behave. For example, like that kind of puritanical kind of rules of you can't do this and you can't do that. that we have in America, that in the 1600s, right? That was very strict society, and Nietzsche was raised in a very strict society in the Victorian realm, where there was a lot of really intense moral rules. That some of that we would find very silly, like showing your ankles is obscene, that for a lady to do. You don't do that. So maybe if we were looking through a Nietzschean lens about, like, we would kind of look back at the story and think, oh, maybe all the symbols in the story were representing things about maybe Cat in the Hat's an Ubermensch. Maybe he's trying to help those kids pull away from being sheeple and to question authority by ignoring the fish. And maybe it's trying to say something about finding your own way, especially the fact that the kids get away with it. If we look at the Nietzsche lens, maybe the book is trying to tell us something about how, we don't necessarily have to follow all the rules just because people tell us. Maybe it's going to be okay, and we'll, it's what's best for us to find out our true selves if we, follow our own rules. Who's to say? I could get into other ones too, but I'm just kind of like giving you a little example, okay? So maybe this is about talking about conformity, ignoring authority, not being a conformist, and not being obedient to power, to be your own person of power, right? To go against our Puritan forefathers or Victorian, the Victorian, because this is American story, we would say our Puritan forefathers maybe, but for Nietzsche it'd be the Victorian culture that was very uptight and strict, right? But we're going to look at a different story. We're going to look at a different children's story with The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. And by the way, in England, you can visit her home. It's gorgeous. It's a museum now. It's where she got all the inspiration for her stories. And I even have some coins. In England, they have 25 pence or 50 pence. Let me look in the drawer here. They are, let's see. Gosh, what is this now? I can't see. My eyes are so bad. Okay. Anyway, there's Beatrix Potter characters on the money. I think they're 25 pence. Anyway, like quarters. She's very influential and important author in Britain, and I bet a lot of you have read her stories or had your stories read to you as a little kid. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the story. And what I want you to do is just listen to the story, and I'll put it at, double speed so you can whiz through it. And I want you to tell me, what do you think the story is? What do you see with this first read? What meanings can you extrapolate or pull out from this children's story, right? What themes do you notice, right? And tell me in the chat box, what do you think the story is all about, and how do you know? Okay, so let's listen and then fill that in the chat box.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Ka-tissue! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all round. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.
Okay, so in the chat box, please tell me, answer these questions. All right, so now we're going to look through a couple different lenses. All right, we're not going to be, I mean, we could do these lenses with Lord of the Flies too if you want to, but these aren't exactly illusions. I'm just trying to show you how you put on different lenses and you can notice things. So one kind of critical lens people use is a gender lens, and these are the assumptions of this lens. I'm not saying anything about the truth or untruth of any of these points. I'm just saying this is what the lens uses. These are assumptions, okay? So one is that gender is central to life. That's an assumption that this lens has. It assumes different genders think differently. And it claims that attention to gender must be paid when examining life and art or literature. And to ignore it is naive and misses out on important arguments and subjective truths. People from different genders see different realities and have different experiences. So, and some of the questions you want to be thinking about are this. Consider gender of the author and the characters. What role does gender play in the text? So how about in Peter Rabbit? What role does gender play in the text? Okay, now observe gender stereotypes that could be reinforced or undermined in the story. Try to see how the text reflects or distorts or distorts the place different genders have in society. Right? Look at the colors in the